How many times have you sat down on a Friday night, ready to game for the whole weekend, only to find out you don't know what to play? Even better, it'd be nice to actually play something that you can beat over the weekend. And why are your shorts so short? Hey everybody, I'm Dylan. Welcome to Beep Boop Loot, where we help casual gamers make the most of their game time. Today we're rounding up 13 of the best short games on Xbox Game Pass that you can beat this weekend. We've ordered the list in ascending playtime, so shortest games first and longest games last. Starting off with number 13 on our list is Inside. This is a game from Play Dead Studios. They also made the game Limbo, if you've ever played that. They're both action puzzler platformers. Inside takes about 4 hours to beat and is the shortest game on this list. So what's so great about Inside? It's beautiful, it's immersive, it feels a lot like you're playing a Stephen King novel come to life. You play as a boy who's moving further and further into this weird facility in the middle of the forest, and you're getting chased by weird guys. There's some really clever puzzles here. They start off simple enough, but they very quickly turn into you jumping into like this weird helmet where you can control other people's movement to have them do what you need to do to get further into the facility. It's weird, it's wonderful, it's creepy. It's also just really hard to put down because of how immersive it is. There's no like tooltips or menus or anything like that. It's all context clues that you have to figure out how to do stuff with, and all of the storytelling is environmental. Also, for me, I played this years ago, and then to prep for this video, I replayed it, and it still holds up. So if you've played this before and it's been a while, this is worth a replay as much as it is worth a first-time try. Next up, we have Firewatch from Campo Santo Studios. It looks like this is the only game they ever made. It takes about 5 hours to beat, but what's so crazy about this being the only game made by the studio is that this is regularly on lists of the best story games of all time. It's a very emotional, contemplative game. It's a walking sim for better or for worse, so just keep that in mind. The gameplay itself is not super mechanically deep. You're mostly just walking around and talking to people, but the atmosphere, the characters, the voice acting, all really ground you in this story and keep you hooked for the full playthrough. The setup here is you play as a guy named Henry and you go into the remote Wyoming wilderness to be a fire lookout, and along the way you make friends with this other lookout named Delilah. And the course of the game takes place mostly in this wilderness, checking out fires and ne'er-do-wells. Do people still use that word? But what's really neat here is the mechanic with the walkie-talkie. So all of your interactions with Delilah take place over this walkie-talkie. And there's a dialogue tree like you see in a lot of other games. But as you move through the forest and do your tasks as a fire lookout, you're able to interact with Delilah whenever you'd like and comment on things in the world. I find this a lot better than a lot of dialogue trees that are very static. It's like watching a cutscene and you're just choosing what to say next. In this case, you're progressing both physically and narratively, so it just feels worth exploring more. Even if you don't like walking sims, there's a lot of ambiance in this that's worth checking out. Number 11 on the list is Still Wakes the Deep. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, we talked about this game on our last roundup about the best new games on Xbox Game Pass. You can check out that video at the top of the screen right now if you're interested. So Still Wakes the Deep is from the developer The Chinese Room. They made Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, so you know you're in for a pretty solid walking sim. This takes about 5 hours to beat. Now again, if you're not into walking sims, I still recommend you check this one out, especially if you like survival horror. This is a really unsettling, very character-driven horror, and I think that's also what makes it so tense and scary, is the character work is great, voice acting is great, it really grounds you in this character's life and what's going on in this oil rig. You play as Kaz McCleary, a down on his luck, troubled man who's working on this oil rig at Christmas time, and then everything goes to crap. You're basically just trying to survive this cosmic threat that's attacked the ship and try to rescue yourself and the rest of the crew. There's this really cool grip mechanic here. It's actually the first of 2 games on this list with a cool grip mechanic. So you have to hold the triggers to hold on to the grip on like a ladder or a ledge or something like that. And what's cool in a game like this is because there's jump scares and there's always a lot of tension, this is just an added layer of tension having to hold on to stuff, otherwise you fall. This is the perfect Friday or Saturday night horror binge. You turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and just try not to poop your pants. Or poop your pants, that's fine too. Up next, we have Cocoon from Geometric Interactive, which is actually led by founders of Play Dead who made Inside, so if you've already tried Inside and really like it, this might be the next one to try. Cocoon takes about 6 hours to beat. It's a great new-ish puzzler with a really cool setting, art style. Just as a fun little aside, there's this trippy mechanic in this game that hits pretty early on where you jump in and out of the world, and it literally looks like you're jumping out of the game. Really cool, kind of gives your head a spin. Also, just like with every puzzle game, there's this knife's edge you're trying to balance at all times where you want there to be challenge so that you feel like you've actually accomplished something, but you don't want it to be frustrating where you're getting stuck every 2 minutes and you have to look up a guide just to move forward. I think Cocoon balances that perfectly. It's got challenge, it feels good solving puzzles, but you're also not gonna like throw your controller across the room in frustration or have to look up YouTube guides just to get through it. Cocoon is really neat. I've seen people talk about it for sure, but if you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out this weekend. So Jusant is made by Don't Nod. They did Life is Strange, Banishers, a lot of kind of AA indie adjacent style games. It takes about 6 hours to finish. It's a meditative action platformer, and it's got a really great engaging climbing system. I know what you're thinking. This is the second game where I'm talking about climbing. I promise it's the second and last time. There just happens to be 2 games with really cool grip mechanics. So let's say your left hand is here. You have to hold the left trigger to keep your hand in that handhold, and then to continue moving, you have to point your direction stick up and aim your right hand, press the right trigger to grab on there, and then you kind of do that back and forth. And that's where, for me, the meditative label comes in. There's like a flow you get into of hitting left trigger, right trigger, and just moving up and up. You can move really quick in this game once you get the hang of it, and it's just like this cool flow you get into. So I know a lot of people might look at this and go, all you're doing is climbing, that's it. I really recommend you check this out, even if you're feeling that way. It's a short game. It was the most surprising game on this list for me by far, and I feel like it's kind of underrated. Coming in at number 8 is Titanfall 2, and oh my Lanta, is that a game. Titanfall 2 is made by Respawn. They made Apex Legends and also the recent Star Wars Jedi games. The reason I call out Apex Legends is Titanfall 2 is actually set in the same universe as Apex Legends, so if you like the gunplay in that game and the setting in general, you'll be right at home here. This takes about 9 hours to beat. For an FPS game, that's pretty standard, but it certainly doesn't overstay its welcome. There are a few cooler moments in video games than Titanfall, or yeah, I guess it's called that. Getting too excited here. When your Titan kneels down, opens up, and lets you get in for the first time, and you get to like use his weapons and jump around and fight other Titans, there is no other feeling quite like that. Titanfall 2 is awesome. It's like the perfect little kid dream of having a mech to save the world with. At least that was a dream of mine. Also, a surprisingly great story here and a really nice change up from the traditional FPS campaign experience. You've got smooth, crunchy gunplay, some clever twists on the FPS formula, and this is just awesome, ridiculous fun. And speaking of ridiculous fun, as of the time of filming this, we just hit 200 subscribers, which is insane. So thank you so much if you're here again or here for the first time. And if you're enjoying this content, we'd love for you to consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Next up is Ori and the Blind Forest. This is a Metroidvania platformer by Moon Studios. They just released Ain't No Rest for the Wicked, but they also have Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So if you enjoy Ori and the Blind Forest, there's actually a second game ready for you whenever you are. I think the visuals here really speak for themselves. I mean, just look at the gameplay here. It's beautiful, vibrant watercolor painting come to life. I actually didn't realize I enjoyed Metroidvanias as much as I actually do. Ori is one of my first memories of a really great Metroidvania. I really like that feeling of coming to like an impasse in the game, not being sure how to move forward, backtracking, finding a new power or piece of gear, and then coming back and tackling that and moving forward. I will say one of the challenges, but also great things about Ori, is the sense of scale in the world. If you've played Hollow Knight, you might know what I'm talking about, this big 2D world that you can kind of get lost in. And that feels really great for the right type of gamer, but just be aware at times you might hit walls and have to double back and sort of trial and error your way into the next area. I think that feels great if you're in the mood for it, but just wanted to call that out. Number 6 on the list is Gears of War, one of the most iconic Xbox franchises of all time, and I think it deserves a revisit in 2024. The original Gears of War takes 12 hours to beat. It's a third-person cover shooter. When I think of Gears of War, it makes me think of a simpler time, and you're gonna think I'm crazy here, but the words that come to mind are bazooka dudes. Does that make any sense to anyone else? Actually, let's do this. In the comments, give me 2 words to describe Gears of War that are better than bazooka dudes. If you've seen the Predator movies or anything like that, this is like muscled up dudes fighting alien bad guys. It's awesome, it's fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, although there are some very emotional beats in this story, so there is like an emotional core to this game that might not seem obvious at first glance. It's also one of the first active reload games I can remember, so every time you run out of ammo, there's like a bar that moves across the screen, and you have to hit it at the right time for a perfect reload, and then you reload faster. It's a cool mechanic. There's other games that do it now, but it just makes you feel a little more engaged in the gunfights because reloading properly gives you an advantage. Gears of War, if you've never played it, is a fun, gritty game, and if you have played it before, I think it still holds up really well in 2024, and like I said, is worth a revisit. Up next, we have Hi-Fi Rush, a relatively new game on this list. It takes about 14 hours to beat, and it's best described as Guitar Hero with Devil May Cry combat. If that sounds weird, don't worry, I thought it was weird too, but basically the premise here is you play as Chai, who through some crazy circumstance ends up with an iPod. Okay, technically it's a music player, but come on. It's an iPod. And basically, once Chai gets this iPod for a heart, everything in the world responds to a musical beat. So when you're fighting in the game, you have to hit the buttons to the beat of a song to do maximum damage. Now, where that gets a little bit complicated is it's not required to hit on the beat. It's just you're going to be severely limiting yourself if you're not trying to keep up with the beat. If you're terrible at rhythm, you can actually set up an assist meter at the bottom that really starts to feel like Guitar Hero if you need it. But also, it's not too bad. It's like relatively easy to see the cues visually in the world. The game does a pretty good job of always showing you the beat in some visual way. But yeah, this is like a linear action combat game. You've got skill trees and skill unlocks. There's score-based combat encounters for all you perfectionists, and there's just a zany story here about a guy who literally has a music player for a heart. One call out here is it can be tough to adjust to that rhythm combat. Yes, there's the assist. Yes, there's a lot of visual cues, but it took me like a level or two to really get comfortable with how to hit the beat. But once you do, it feels awesome. I would have never consciously admitted to being a survival horror fan, not because there's anything wrong with it, I just didn't think that was my jam. But when I look at my favorite games, a lot of them actually are survival horror. One of them being Resident Evil 2, which is one of the OG survival horror games. This takes about 15 hours to play through. One important call out, there's 2 protagonists and you can choose which one to play as. You have to play through as both characters to get the ultimate ending of the game, so just keep that in mind. For the most part, the game plays similarly though, so the second playthrough might feel like a bit of a slog. Although, once you know what you're doing, you can probably get through your second playthrough in like 5 hours. What I love most about Resident Evil is the balancing of different genres. You've got action, you've got horror, you've got puzzles, and you also have this sort of cartoonish sense of humor that pops up every once in a while. It's just like, for me, chef's kiss. And important call out, if you like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 Remake is also available on Game Pass. It's not as good as 2, but it's still pretty good. Coming in at number 3 is the Tomb Raider reboot by Crystal Dynamics. This is going to take you about 16 hours to beat. The Tomb Raider reboot is a cinematic action game with a great mix of puzzles, stealth, and all-out combat. For those that don't know, I mean, Tomb Raider really is the OG Uncharted inspiration, and it's got some awesome set pieces to take part in. The only thing that might be a little frustrating to some players is there's quite a few QuickTime events in this game where you have to hit certain buttons to progress the cutscene, basically. I get why in a cinematic game like this, you need that to pull off certain set pieces, but for some people, that's just not fun and they don't like it. I still think Tomb Raider is definitely worth playing through just to get to the puzzles and the combat. It's a really, really fun game. And again, like a lot of other games on this list, the whole trilogy is on Game Pass. So if you like this game, the second one, Rise of the Tomb Raider, I think, is even better. If you're looking for something really unique, the next game on the list, Neon White, might be your style. Now, Neon White was also on our best new games on Game Pass list last week, and everything I said then still holds true. This is an action platformer, card-based FPS. It's got a lot of things going on that don't necessarily feel like they should work, but they really do. When I first saw Neon White, before I played it, I thought that it was a turn-based game and you played cards to make yourself move forward in levels. That's not true at all. This is fully real-time. It's a shooter. You pick up cards through the levels and you're shooting demons and trying to platform your way to a final spot. Where the game gets really fun and addicting is the combination of different cards. So every card you pick up is typically a weapon, and you have an active effect and then a discard effect when you discard that card. And it's juggling those things on the fly and navigating these real-time puzzles that makes this game so fun. It's also a speedrunner's dream. Every level has different badges you can unlock based on performance, and when you hit the highest tier, you actually unlock more levels. So not only is it a speedrunner's dream, it's a completionist's dream too. This is another game that really surprised me at how much fun it was. I actually got so into this that I lost track of time and I recorded way too much footage. Talk about a tough edit. But yeah, even if this isn't your genre of game, I recommend downloading this one and just giving the first few levels a try. I think you'll be surprised. Number 1 on this list is a game that I feel needs a lot more attention. Not only is it the longest game on this list, but I also think it is the most underrated, and that is Immortals of Aveum. So this is from Ascendant Studios. It's their first game, and it'll take you about 20 hours to complete. This is basically a Marvel movie in video game form. It's big, loud, bombastic, over-the-top fun. What's unique here is it's a first-person shooter, but everything's based around spells. So there's no guns in this game. You have different, augments for your wrist, claw, and they all behave like different weapons. So you have your assault rifle, your shotgun, your rocket launcher type thing. You also have cool utility spells like a whip and a shield. And again, I talked about this before in another video, but the whip shotgun combo to the face, I could just do that all day. The story also, don't go into it expecting something incredible, but it's decent enough. It's like popcorn fun, go to the movies, big blockbuster style event. I'm not sure how much this will resonate with everyone, but for me, this game feels like a nostalgia trip. It feels like a game from a simpler time, where you sat down and there were these big original ideas. They didn't always stick the landing, but they were fun and interesting. It reminds me of coming home from school, firing up your 360, and there's just Something nostalgic here that feels really great. So what are you planning on playing this weekend? Did anything on this list make it to your radar now? Is there anything I missed on the list that you think is worth mentioning? Would love to chat about it. And if none of these games tickle your fancy, check out this video right here where we do a game spotlight on Dungeons of Hinterberg, a brand new game on Xbox Game Pass that I think is excellent. Thanks so much for stopping by. I'm Dylan. This is Beep Boop Loot. We'll see you in the next one.